If you're doing everything yourself, you're not building, you're surviving.
What's going on, beautiful people? Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Grind.
BTG.
Hey, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. And please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any of our future content. Our podcast is for those who want to go beyond the grind. My name is Kay.
I'm Alan.
And I'm Tosin. Today, we're continuing the conversation that we had previously where I shared, the benefits of delegation and also how I learned to delegate. So this week, we're continuing that with K, my man K.
Let's go.
Dr.
Right.
K. Dr. K.
So,
Not really a doctor, but
same way like we started last week. We're going to go all the way back to where...
way back.
If you can remember, what was the first time you finally figured out that, hey, I need to delegate? Or delegation has some value and I need to take this thing seriously?
It's interesting that you asked that because I didn't go into entrepreneurship until 2019. I was what you would call an ambitious employee, right? So I didn't have the luxury to be able to delegate like you gentlemen. But I guess for me, it started out when I started running my fintech company, right? And, I started to hire folks, but I was still indirectly still doing some of the work that
you hired somebody
that I hired
else.
them to do because I had sold myself on that they didn't have enough full context for them to be able to do certain things, and I needed to be able to get my hands dirty and be involved in every single thing. So, but it got to a point where it was draining because I was there was stuff that I needed to do that I was putting to the side, focusing on what everybody has going on. And then by the time the day is over, now it's time for me to focus on the strategic leadership work that needs to get done.
So
and it gets to a point
in the business, not on the business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. And it gets to a point where it's draining. And, I'm pushing out updates on LinkedIn like, man, startup is not for the weak, this, that, and third. Not realizing that part of my major problem is the fact that I didn't have any operational efficiencies, in my business. So around that time was when I really started to, and I didn't even know that it was because of the lack of delegation and when it was happening. I think where it kind of clicked was when somebody told me that, hey, you've never been a COO before. So you need to get a mentor who is a COO who's been where you're currently functioning, and they can kind of mentor you and guide you on how to navigate the complexity of being in leadership. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. And I remember this lady, she was the COO for another fintech, but obviously they're a unicorn, right? Reached out to her and I said, hey, my name is Kay. This is what I do. This is what my business is about. Hey, I'm looking to see if you can mentor me, because right now, as the CEO of my company, we have some, we lack operational efficiencies, and I'm just looking to see if you can mentor me and see how you can help me navigate. And she was like, yeah, sure, no problem. As we started speaking, she made me to realize that, dude, you're doing everything backwards. Like, what's the point of hiring people if you're not going to use them?
So let me ask you this question, because you first initially said that you were telling yourself something, or you believed something that made you, let's call it, micromanage the staff. What are those things that you were telling yourself? Like, where did it come from? Okay. Is it like an insecurity? I mean, like, let me...
So, when you're a startup, everything is high stake in your mind, right? Because unlike, when you talked about how one of your employees had 350 clients, the whole company got like maybe 5 clients.
But 5 very important clients.
Yeah.
Right?
And when you're in a situation where you're giving investors updates on a consistent basis, the last thing you want to tell an investor is you lost a client.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So for me, to answer your question directly, it wasn't about insecurity. I think it was the need to have perfection. You know, I have a vision in terms of how I want something to be, right? And it's almost like this person doesn't have the context. They've never worked with me before.
Yeah.
So they might not really understand how I like things to be done. Discounting the fact that everybody has different ways of doing things.
That's correct.
And that person that you've brought on might even be smarter than you in that specific thing that you brought them on board for. I remember Mark Zuckerberg said he doesn't hire anybody that reports directly to him unless he feels like that person is, one, smarter than him, but number two, if he couldn't do the job, this person is capable of doing that job, right? And I think you kind of talked about it. Whereas, you know, to be able to have full trust, you got to make sure that the interview process is quite solid enough that you don't have to worry about the trust thing. But I think for me, it was more of a control mechanism that I was dealing with personally.
That's actually big, because I want to talk about that. If you're the personality that likes control, that needs control, delegation is going to be hard for you.
Yeah, and so here's the thing.
Would you say you were that personality at that point?
No, I don't think the mindset was I need to have control. I think the mindset was just being so overly conscious of the external perspective should things don't go the way it's meant to go, right?
It'd be it'd be on you.
It'll be on me, right? And so, and mind you, even the folks that I brought in, this is the first time I've had to interview folks to bring them on board, right? And in that process, one thing I have learned is that my intuition about not fully trusting the folks that I originally onboarded was right, because the interview process.
Ooh, tell us more.
Okay,
I'm telling it all.
I'll give you an
Are
example.
y'all out there?
So there's a guy that I onboarded. So as a COO, I have HR, I have marketing, and I have compliance, and I have customer service that reported to me, right? There was a guy that I onboarded for customer service, right? He's one of the first people that I brought on. Now, everybody know that when you're in customer service, like, your sole job is for customer satisfaction. Like, that is it. And
number one.
On top of that, you kind of have to have some sort of personality. You can't, if you're a tech geek don't fit into customer service, because
you just want to be behind your screens.
Exactly.
And
you just care about numbers and the data.
They just can't relate. And
it's an inside joke there.
So when I was interviewing this individual, you know, she said everything that I wanted to hear.
Of course. I mean,
but the reality is that there were questions that I didn't know to ask, that I should have asked, that were tailored specific for the role, right? A lot of the questions that I was asking were more to do with the type of clients that we have and what specifically I'm looking for. But I didn't really ask the soft skills.
You didn't have ChatGPT back then.
Well, yeah, we didn't.
To create those questions.
ChatGPT came out, late 2012, right? No, 2022, yeah. So there were certain questions that I didn't ask. So when I brought this person in, I'm like, yeah, I need you to do X, Y, Z. And they would do it. And then they would give it back to me. And I'm like, no, like, I'm basically like making so many corrections to the point that now it's gotten to a point where
it's your job.
It's my job, right?
Yeah.
And then everything that they're doing, you know, ends up being, no, it's not right. It's not right. And then it gets to a point where you start to feel bad. And then you start to ask yourself, like, is this a DEI hire? Because, you know,
you went there.
The person is not performing, but you feel so bad to let them go because now you've built a relationship with them.
But that's what we talked about, that emotional kind of view.
I think you mischaracterized DEI. That's not what DEI is.
Over that, but go ahead.
Someone explain what DEI is. It's not that.
Guys, it's not DEI.
It's not that. He was purposely misusing the term.
Yeah, I misused the term, but
Yeah.
there was an emotional attachment because I understood, the background, the family, all that good stuff.
Correct.
But I couldn't, say to myself like, bruh, it's not working until I had to outsource the hiring process to professionals.
And
It was
Nine-
basically headaches
Yeah.
upon headaches for me.
Yeah.
So my intuition was right, and your point about making sure that the hiring process is solid was, what actually messed up the entire
Wait,
process.
let me back up. You said you didn't want to make the move to cut off the whatever it is, dead weight, so to speak, I guess, until you decided to outsource it. Is that what I heard, right?
Yeah, I decided.
So it's better to outsource it? at
No,
that
no,
point?
the hiring
outsource the
process.
hiring.
The
Yeah.
hiring
Yes.
process was work better when you outsource it? Oh,
because
okay.
at this point,
So the headaches went away.
The-
Less headaches.
Right.
Okay, got it. I see
right,
what you're saying.
because at that point, when I'm speaking to the headhunter, I'm not only
They know
I'm
what
not only telling them what I'm looking for, but I'm also telling them the
Problems you
challenges
have,
that I'm
yeah.
experiencing.
Right.
Right. For them to be able to say, okay,
and
what?
they do their
We
job.
know how to do what we need to
Right.
do to bring in the right person. Now that person costs me a whole lot of money.
Of course, plus the headhunter fee, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I mean,
But it gave you more trust because
Yes.
they found you
Yes.
someone, or at least someone who interviewed, like
Yeah.
they knew what they were doing.
And one thing I found out about that process is that there are people that are great interviewers
Yes.
that they can sell you.
They're good salesmen.
Tell me about
They're good
it.
salesmen.
They
They're
can sell
studied.
you fire in hell. They can sell water to a well.
Right?
sell you your own business.
Exactly.
Right?
But then when it's time to execute, you realize that
Gone nowhere.
it's
It's
a
all
whole
smoke and
totally different.
mirrors. Yeah.
But to cut the long story short, once I was able to bring in the right people,
Mm-hmm.
The delegation happened organically because of
Yes.
little
Nuances and
nuances. So
Yeah.
basically, I give you something small.
You knock it out.
or
knock it
even
out, and
you
it
see
started
the
going.
initiative being taken, so you're like, oh, just why don't you have that?
I think not even the initiative. What impressed me more is no. I don't think we should do it like that. I think we should do it like this, like this.
So they
like
give you
this.
ideas, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
And
that's
then
what I mean.
At that point, it's
You're
like,
well,
oh, I
you
ain't
better
even
than
think about- I
you
ain't
better than
think about
me.
You
that.
start to take ownership.
Ownership.
They
That's the
started-
word I'm
exactly,
saying.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm looking
Yes.
for. They started to take ownership to the point that, like, customer service was an afterthought to me.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about it anymore.
But it
because
was
now-
before.
It was before. So yeah.
That's good. That's good. Like that, you pretty much answer like 30 questions in one story. Like for real. Like you gave us a playbook.
Yes.
What's the key? Outsource hiring.
If you're not good at
Right,
it.
you're not good at
If you don't think that you can develop people, if you think you can't find the right
Everything
people,
you can outsource.
Yes,
Truthfully,
yes.
it doesn't mean it comes cheap.
It doesn't. I've done it before and it wasn't cheap, and it did yield faster results. I was like, oh. And I would say any business that needs to delegate or scale, that hiring process is
Yes.
so tediously
Yeah.
painful. Some of us inherit good employees from businesses we purchase.
Yes.
And some of us have to build it, right? And when you get a good employee, I that's why I don't understand companies that, they have issues with compensation and this, and I'm like, you got good employees. You should like, what is the issue? Like, you understand what the replacement cost is?
Yeah.
Like, do you not remember back then? And so I'm with you on like, look, take that headache off your table. If you can get it'll pay itself 10 times over because you're not sitting there going through bad hires.
Speaking of taking the headache off the table, I remember I told you guys about the lady that was mentoring me when I first got into entrepreneurship. The first thing that she told me to do, she said, go read this book called Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman. For those of you who don't know Gino Wickman, Gino Wickman
I
is
know
the
who
one
he
that wrote the book Traction that I talk about, I Live and Die, the entrepreneur operating system, right?
Right.
So if you're an entrepreneur, if you haven't read that book, go read that book.
Yeah.
But in Rocket Fuel, it breaks down like your decision-making process, how you should always handle things, right? And it broke it down into 4 things, right? Things that you love doing and that you're also good at. That's number 1. Things that you like doing and you're also good at, right? Things that you don't like doing what you're good at, right? And then things that you don't like doing and you're not good at, right? So as an entrepreneur, like,
I remember that in that book.
you should always be able to, you know, be able to segregate, you know, the things that you're doing in your business and identify what are the things that I'm good at, that I like doing, that I love doing, things that I'm not good at, you know, that I don't like doing, and things that I don't like doing, but I'm good at it, right? And the whole hiring process, that was something that I was able to quickly identify that, you know what?
You didn't know till you knew.
I'm not good at this, right? And I don't like doing it because I failed, you know, previously, right? And when I did that, I realized I was a lot more efficient in how I did things, right? It made me to delegate a lot more due to the fact that I trusted the process in which I was working with, right? Everything that I was good at and I loved doing were a lot of, investor relations, you know, building relationship, internal, external. I was like, you know what? I'm keeping these because that's when I shine the best, right?
It's no stress.
Exactly.
It gives you joy too.
Exactly. It gives me joy. Things that, you know, I like and I was, you know, good at, those are like things like the numbers of the business, right? Because, you know, I went to school for accounting and we all know accounting numbers tell a story, right? And for me, I need to be able to understand what's happening so I can communicate with the stakeholders, my stakeholders, you know, my investors on what's happening. And I also need to be able to make a decision.
Right.
So naturally, I like that, right? And then I was able to identify things that, you know, I'm not good at, things that I don't like doing, but I'm good at it. I was able to outsource it. For me, I don't like doing inputting numbers on the computer. Like there is accounting, like analysis, and then there's accounting.
Like data entry.
I don't like doing no data entry. I'm good at it because I can reconcile and things like that. But that's not what I want to do. So
some people love it.
Yeah,
I have people who love it.
Exactly.
So once you learned that delegating works, have you had the opportunity to actually teach an employee how to delegate?
That's actually a really, really good question.
I'm still doing that.
Yes, I have. And I'll give you a story. So we all know how with entrepreneur operating system, the way it works is you have your North Star matrix, right? And based on the North Star matrix, you know, they call it rocks, but in this case, we'll just call them 3 action items. So let's say we need to make $10,000 month-to-month revenue. That's your North Star matrix, okay? The question now is, what are the 3 things that needs to happen for us right? And so what I do on my stand-up call with my leadership team is I'm assigning each one person to each of those 3 things, right? And the question I'm asking them is, so let's say, for example, you know, I've been able to identify something that's for the marketing department. I'm going to say, hey, for this $10,000 to happen, what needs to happen in marketing? And once you've been able to tell me what needs to happen in marketing, what are the, you know, the things that, you know, the activities that needs to happen for us to be able to accomplish that, right? And who are you going to delegate it to on your team to be able to do that, right? So while they're getting an update from their team, I'm also going to be getting an update from that individual. So that's kind of like my thought process and how I delegate. I empower the people around me to be able to say, well, for the first way I empower them is by letting everybody understand that we're all on the same, letting everybody know what the goal is. You know, and the goal is the North Star matrix. Once everybody understands what the North Star matrix is, then at that point, it's about, okay, I need you to go figure out what you're going to do in your department to add to this. I need you to go figure out what you're going to do in your department to add to this. And then the rest just flows.
Right.
Have you guys ever done that before?
I have.
Yeah. I mean, like in our firm, like,
it's different. I mean, startups are ran differently than a consulting
definitely.
firm.
Or maybe a business that doesn't require as much external influence. Like like a startup.
Yeah.
But in our firm, really what we're trying to do is to create processes that can be repeated, right? Because we have, let's call it 3 different levels: staff managers and then the senior leaders, right? So the staff are the ones that are doing that data entry that nobody likes, right? However, you have to be able to fully delegate it to them so that you as a manager, you're not coming back to redo every single thing that they're doing, right? So we definitely have to make sure that the processes are there so that they can also, like show those processes to the staff and make it repeatable.
Yeah.
So SOPs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Standard operating procedures.
And I mean, and for me, I feel like that's also part of the operational efficiencies that I talked about, right? I'm very much obsessed with efficiencies, right? So not just when it comes to the goals that needs to be accomplished, but also the process that we need to implement to make sure that we're running like a well-run oil machine, and nobody has to question who needs to do what.
So I think you have a certain type of personality. You need a certain type of personality to do that. You need, one, you can't be working in the business. You have to be on the business. So if you're working in the business, there's no way you can implement all you want. But if there's no way to have accountability and follow up on it regularly because you're busy being in the business, processes don't mean anything because nobody's checking up on them. It's just when you remember, and people, when things get hard, people get lazy. And if there's no way of doing it, even when there's some ownership, how do they, if I'm a manager and I have a lot to do and I have to make sure this is done and nobody's checking up and helping everybody stay on balance and it falls only to me, then if I'm not held to it, I'm just going to focus on my task. I'm not going to necessarily check on the workers below me.
Delegation that we're talking about is not just trust and let it go.
No, there has to be a follow-up.
Verify.
I guess my main thing is like, you got to make sure you're not just working in the business. You have to reserve time to work on the business as a business owner.
So I know, we talked about trust in the process, right? For me, the way I trust the process, there's no ambiguity with what's going on. Because if we say if I've delegated that, we need to get 10 clients this month, right? And for that to happen, one of the action item would be that you need to speak to 100 clients this month, right? So, which means that every week you probably need to speak like 25 clients, right? So the first week, if you don't show that you have spoken to 25 clients, meaning that you have accomplished 25% of those action items,
we need to have
we're not even talking about trust at this point, because it's already evident that you're not going to meet your goal, right? So for me, it's all about visibility, right? So what processes can you put in place to make sure that while you do let your people know that you trust them, there are matrix in place to make sure that we're not waiting to the end of the month to have this conversation.
That's correct.
Once the first week is over, the conversation is, what happened? Why is this not happening, right? And if you're not performing, then we can easily take that from you and give it to somebody else, right? Because there is I think the biggest thing I learned being in leadership, especially when it comes to delegation, is that it's not an emotional thing. You have to have a foundation. You have to be grounded in how you make decisions, and your folks have to understand your rationale, how you make decisions, so that when you're making decisions, it doesn't catch them off guard, because they already know how you work. Because I think part of delegation is also a reflection of your leadership traits and skills. Like, have you prepared them to be able to receive what you're delegating? Yeah. So that's also something to consider.
Hey, no problem.
I was just going over some things in my head about like, what am I not doing? Did I follow up on those metrics? Like, when was the last time? Wasn't that dude that, I started running things like, I didn't do this. I need to do that. I need to do this.
But go ahead and wrap us up real quick.
Yeah. So, today, We talked about delegation, and as part of our series, you've heard Tosin's point of view and his background and how he delegates and how he analyzes and kind of follows up on it. And then you heard Kay, who also gave us a lot of gems today. Like you saw me thinking about it and trying to kind of go in my head, making a checklist of things I need to go back and implement in my business, make sure I get back to, the beginning. But I hope this was beneficial to you guys. If you like what you heard or saw today, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe. Share this video with your friends, comment, and interact. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment below. We want you, until next time, grind smart, lead bold, and go beyond the grind. And where can they find us?
They can find us at gobeyondthegrind.com.
That's right.
Yeah.
And peace
out.
To make strategic decisions and take calculated risks. We'll also talk about future-proofing your business so you can build a lasting legacy and true freedom. This isn't a one-sided conversation. We're all on this journey together to build a life and a business that works for you, so you don't miss any of our upcoming